Republicans who dared to question the legitimacy of the last election, which in many ways was obviously...
Okay, pretty good rant there from Tucker Carlson. So I'm looking at an article on the center-left website, Outside the Beltway, DeSantis' Martha Vineyard stunt. Well, how is this a stunt any more than 80, 90, 95, 99% of politics? When we got Obamacare, wherein we transferred $2 trillion from productive citizens to much less productive citizens. How is that not a stunt? Right? When you raise taxes on a certain group, or you lower taxes on a certain group, or you create intricate loopholes so that people with really sharp lawyers can get around the law, how is that not a stunt? How is almost all of politics not a stunt? When you send people off to fight in a stupid war like the war in Iraq in 2003, how is that not a stunt? George W. Bush thought that invading Afghanistan in 2001 and invading Iraq in 2003 would be good for Republicans' political fortunes, and they did prosper initially. Republicans did far better than expected in the 2002 midterm elections. Then George W. Bush won re-election in 2004. And so he went into these foreign invasions and had thousands of Americans maimed, thousands of Americans died, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and Afghans died. But George W. Bush, he got some initial political capital. Now, how is that not a stunt? All right, John F. Kennedy with the Cuban Missile Crisis. He's facing midterm elections where the Democrats are looking quite shaky. The Democrats coming under fire as being weak on communists. So John F. Kennedy plays a role in amping up the Cuban Missile Crisis, placing the entire world at risk so that Democrats can do better in the 1962 midterm elections. How is that not a stunt? Joe Biden is risking World War III by sending tens of billions of dollars into Ukraine. The Biden administration never had any interest in securing a peace deal in Europe. The Biden administration never had any interest in reaching some kind of arrangement between Russia and Ukraine and NATO so that we would not have this war. So how is the Biden administration fueling, subsidizing, pumping up a war, having no interest in reducing the war, having no interest in reaching a peace deal between these warring factors? Joe Biden and his administration are deliberately risking World War III because Joe Biden had really low approval ratings, and this helps him to look tough. And his approval ratings are going up, right? By pulling this political stunt, Joe Biden may well save the Democrats from being wiped out in the midterm elections. How is that not a stunt? What politics is not a stunt? Right? There is a stunt element to virtually all of politics. So calling what Ron DeSantis is doing a stunt is like saying that water flows downhill. All right, Stephen L. Taylor, political scientist, writing here, this is just playing crass political games with human beings. So how about not enforcing the border? How is that not a stunt? Right? Not securing the border. How is that not a stunt? How about inviting illegals in and flooding them with social welfare spending? How is that not a stunt? How is transferring $2 trillion with Obamacare from more productive to less productive American citizens, how is that not just playing crass political games with human beings? What part of politics is not playing crass political games with human beings? When they set a speed limit or gun control laws or abortion laws, how is that not a crass political game with human beings? So Stephen L. Taylor writes, since Venezuela is one of the countries that the American right uses as a great boogeyman. See, it's only the American right who thinks that Venezuela is a boogeyman. All right, it's only people on the right who think that there's something wrong with Venezuela's dictatorial regime. It's only people on the right who think that the left-wing socialist takeover of Venezuela is not a good thing. Like, normal, healthy people, they don't have a problem with how Venezuela has been destroyed and how millions of Venezuelans are starving and this once moderately prosperous nation has been reduced to abject poverty, right? Right-thinking people have no problem with that. It's only people on the right who use Venezuela as a great boogeyman. It seems odd to pick on potential refugees from the country that is very much experiencing an economic disaster. But why is it odd? Right, that you point out that Venezuela is run by leftists who have ruined the country. Why does it then follow that you would welcome in tens of thousands of illegal immigrants from that country? All right. Venezuelans have turned Venezuela into a shithole country. Why is it then in my interest to bring those people into this country? Why don't they get their act together down in Venezuela? Right. I think the Venezuelan government has been an absolute disaster for about 20 years now. It's only gotten worse over the last 6 years. And I still don't want to bring them into my country. I mean, what's so terribly complicated about that?
No one's talking about vaccine mandates anymore, but they still exist, and they're still destroying people's lives with less justification than ever. The vaccine doesn't really work, and it hurts people. And yet still, New York City this year has fired more than 1,400 city employees who refused to take the government shot. The city pressured many more employees to resign.
Okay. I don't really care one way or another about that. So let's go back to immigration. The main incentive for immigrants coming to the U.S. is they're seeking better lives for themselves and their families. People in the media, people on the left, and Democratic politicians, and many moderate Republicans think this is such a strong argument. Hey, the reason that people would rob you, they're only seeking a better life, bro. The reason that people participate in breaking and entering, they're only seeking a better life. The reason that some people would turn you over and rape your backside is they're only seeking a better life. They're experiencing a sexual emergency, right? The reason we do everything, the reason that people rape and murder, break and enter, rob, torture people is because that they are seeking better lives for themselves and for their families. So the odds that sanctuary cities are primary drivers of migrant flows is absurd. Oh, it's absurd to think that the more you subsidize bad, illegal behavior, the more you get of it. And the more you discourage and penalize bad, illegal behavior, then the less you get of it. That's just absurd. Right. I mean, poor Laponius, all right? He's come to the realization now that Uncle Wally was only seeking a better life in his tender young backside. The jobs migrants can get are the main incentive. And many of those jobs are in Texas and other Republican-controlled states. Yeah, they only want jobs, except for when they just want astronomical amounts of welfare. So they're just astronomical rates of welfare dependence, not just in the first generation, but in the second, third, and fourth generation from many countries in Latin America. It's not like, oh, the first generation comes in and the second generation is more prosperous and the third generation more prosperous. No, there's a steady decline for many immigrants from Latin America. They become less prosperous, more reliant on social welfare spending, and essentially become less productive, less useful citizens. We are talking about human beings here. Oh, so we're not talking about human beings when you have illegals flooding into Texas. That's not human beings when we have illegals flooding into Florida or Arkansas or Alabama or that New Mexico. We're not talking about human beings. We're talking about human beings whether we have illegals in Mexico or in Texas or in Florida or in Martha's Vineyard, right? It is flatly grotesque and inhumane to use humans, especially extremely vulnerable ones, as pawns in a political game. So Obamacare, right, transfers $2 trillion from productive citizens to less productive citizens, right? That massive subsidizing of antisocial behavior that Democrats typically engage in, that's not grotesque and that's not inhumane. What part of politics is not grotesque? What part of politics is not inhumane? What part of politics does not use human beings, especially extremely vulnerable ones, as pawns in a political game? Isn't that virtually all of politics? Like, please correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. This is made worse by the fact that Ron DeSantis was stoking fears about secret flights when the Biden administration was moving underage immigrants around the country to alleviate pressure on border states. So why is it made worse, right? The Biden administration is flying illegal immigrants all over the country. Like, what is bad about mentioning that? This makes it sound like the Biden administration is just dumping migrants around the country in some nefarious secret plans. Well, the Biden administration is not defending our border. To me, that's nefarious, right? So to me, the Biden administration's border defense policies are nefarious. Like, on what perspective are the encouraging of over 1 million illegal immigrants a year under the Biden administration is not nefarious? Now, this political scientist says, I fully understand that DeSantis is just stirring the base. Well, isn't that what politicians do? They're either stirring the base or they're trying to bring in people who are undecided. So he's saying that water flows downhill. Trying to talk about actual policy solutions is almost pointless. Well, guess what? The Trump administration essentially crushed illegal immigration. So yeah, I want to talk about actual public policy solutions. Let's talk about them. Let's go back to doing what the Donald Trump administration was doing during its last 9 months in office, right? Donald Trump essentially ended illegal immigration in 2020. So let's go back to doing that. Dumping human beings in various liberal-leaning states to basically own the libs for TV purposes is grotesque. Oh, that's grotesque, but allowing the Biden administration to dump human beings in various conservative-leaning states, that's not grotesque? Again, these are people. They are poor. They have brown skin. They don't speak English. Doesn't make them okay to treat them like objects. Guess what? We all treat people like objects. There's no other way for government to function, for politics to function, than to treat people like objects. I thought this guy's a political scientist, right? All his mates on the site are political scientists. There is no other way for a bureaucracy to function, for a government to function, for a large state, a medium-sized state, or a small state, than to treat people like objects. The government doesn't get to treat people on an I-thou basis. That doesn't work. That's not reality. I would have thought this guy would have been wiser. So much of the base that DeSantis seeks to please are self-identified Christians. Yeah? So what? So to identify as a Christian means that you are suicidal, that you support the trashing of your country, that you want, illegal immigrants, flooding into your home. Why? Well, there's a verse in the Bible when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. Oh, wow. So, boy, that really shows Ron DeSantis. All the nations will be gathered before him. Wow, just imagine that there are messianic dreams in Christianity and in Judaism, that there are dreams that individuals and cultures have that don't necessarily comport with the way that individuals and cultures behave in the real world. I'm pretty shocked. I can't imagine that there are utopian sentiments in some cultures that do not 100% align with the actual policing policies in these cultures. If GOP politicians don't like to be referred to as semi-fascist, they shouldn't treat a group of people like subhuman pawns. Oh, so moving illegal immigrants from one part of the country to another part of the country, Right? That's great when the Biden administration does it. Right? This guy was just defending the Biden administration shifting illegal immigrants from one part of the country to another part of the country, and that's great. And to criticize that is stupid and wrong. But if Republicans move illegal immigrants from one part of the country to another part of the country, well, they are moving people like subhuman pawns. So the Biden administration chooses not to defend our southern border, but they're not treating people like subhuman pawns. The Biden administration, when they shift illegal immigrants all over the country, they're not engaging in power moves just to score political points. This really is indefensible behavior. It's indefensible behavior when Republicans do it. It's perfectly defensible when Democrats do it, right? The Biden administration moves illegal immigrants around the country. That's good. Republican administrations in Texas and Florida move illegal immigrants around the country. That is indefensible. And it's just striking the overwhelming uniformity of media reactions to this story. But this is not why I came here tonight. I stand before you, and I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to open up. Right? I want to let you in on a secret. I came before you because I want to build the world a home and furnish it with love. I want to grow apple trees and honeybees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like it to hold it in my arms and keep it company. I'd like to see the world for once, or standing hand in hand, and hear them echo through the hills for peace throughout the land. I mean, that's what I'm all about. That's why I teach the silent la la la. Right, so just check out if you've got any unnecessary tension in your neck or in your ankle. Like if you've got any unnecessary tension anywhere in your body, it's going to negatively affect your voice quality. I come to this show day in and day out to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony and to really sing to the best of our abilities. We have to let go of unnecessary tension. We have to get in touch with our silent la la las. And like, look at my neck. Is this not a beautiful free neck? I mean, look at this. Like I'm engaged in deep, lofty thought. I'm articulating the most profound thoughts that have ever come to human beings. And yet I've got a free neck. I mean, see the width across my chest and across my shoulders. See how free my shoulders are. See that when I pick up a pen, do you notice excess tension in my wrist or in my fingers or in my arm? You notice any contraction in my shoulders? No, I hold my pen lightly, all right? No unnecessary compression or holding patterns, right? So many people, when they get a pen, they just grip it about as tight as they can be, and then they wonder why their hand starts hurting. You want to do everything as lightly and easily as possible. I mean, do I come on here and just start bombarding you? Is 40 the type of bloke who comes on here and starts preaching at you? Do I come here and say, oh, you must do this, and I lecture you about that? No, this is a free, loving, open place, right? I hold onto my ideas as lightly as I hold onto this pen. When I realize I'm wrong, I just say I'm wrong, right? I don't have to grasp onto my ideas. I don't need the protection of my ideology. I'm just here in a free, emotionally inclusive, loving space. And I share my delusions with you, and you share your delusions with me. And I don't need to hold on to any of my points, really strongly. I hold on to my ideas lightly. I'm just a flawed human being going through life at a certain time and place, speaking to you from a certain situation, recognizing that you're the same. And I'm here to think about how can real life human beings who have all sorts of drives and desires, like how can we create a better world? I mean, not liking out groups is normal, natural, right? It's just kind of wired into us to want to feel superior to other people. I mean, conservatives, generally speaking, have concentric circles of moral duty, all right, to themselves, to their family, to their community, right? Liberals tend to have, skipping skipping moral persuasions. They care about themselves, but then they care about Kenya, and then they care about Ukraine, but they don't necessarily have particular loyalty to the community in which they live. So you've got leapfrogging loyalties versus concentric circles of loyalty. But it's just wired into human beings to want to feel superior. So conservatives pride themselves in spotting potential signs of disorder and contagion. People on the left pride themselves in spotting ignorance and bigotry and racism. And so I thought I wanted to talk about how to be an adaptive racist, right? Rather than be a maladaptive Nazi, right? Rather than be a maladaptive bigot. Now, why not be adaptive? Right? Why not harness these basic human drives and pull them off? Hey, cut that out. And pull them off in a way that is much more adaptive, right? Makes things better for everyone. We can take basic instincts and tune them up, turn them around, and do something that is not going to just destroy, right? But first we have to recognize reality. So, where's my timestamp here? Come on, mate. Peep Show, Season 2, Episode 2.
A band isn't an army, but you need some organisation.
Exactly my feeling, exactly.
I mean, democracy's all very well, but it's weak and it's decadent. You need a strong leader. I'm in character.
Oh, yes, right. Yes, the fatherland needs the Führer. Oh, God, I'm even boring when I'm a Nazi.
Jesus. Classic rubbernecker. Absolutely no interest in military history. Might as well be checking out fucking seed drills down a farm museum.
So, Season 2, Episode 2, Mark, one of the two main characters, has finally made a friend. And Mark's kind of antisocial. They're both hilariously selfish people, fairly degenerate. But finally, Mark's found a friend, but he's a little taken aback because his friend turns out to be a neo-Nazi.
Still, it's nice to get out of the city, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's nice to get away from it all, isn't it? You know, the work, the smog, the graffiti.
Yeah, the traffic, the noise, the hassle.
The car alarms, the cash points, the blacks, the packies, the Jews.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what we all want, a racially pure nation.
Exactly. I mean, all we're saying is England for the English, right?
You mean Germany for the Germans? You mean... This is... are we...
Rights for whites. That's not too much to ask, is it?
Is this real now?
We're on the same wavelength, right? Everyone thinks it. The difference is, we're not afraid to say it.
Oh, shit. Oh, bollocks. Of course. I can't just make a nice, normal friend. Oh, no, that would be far too simple.
Heil Hitler?
Heil?
You're not supposed to do that, Daryl. You know you're not supposed to do that.
I've got to cut the link. Daryl is definitely beyond.
So, rest of the money should be rolling in soon, which is just as well.
People are complicated, all right? It's not unusual that your best friends may have very different politics from you. Obviously, the more you have in common, the better. But...
Or maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe everyone does it now, and it's cool and Ali G, and I'm just an old stick in the mud as usual.
Mark, like I said, sorry if I was a bit of a cockmuncher down the studio.
Fine. It's totally fine, mate. Honestly. Listen, I might just pop down the Chinky. Do you want anything?
Whoa.
From,
So at what level of racism or bigotry or neo-Nazi sympathies do you cut ties with someone? Right? So obviously we're hearing some antisocial sentiments here. Right? This is not a good way. It's not an adaptive strategy for expressing your in-group preference. All right? You can strongly have an in-group preference without destroying your life.
No, I'm all right, thanks.
What about from the Packy shop? Do you want anything from in there?
The Packy shop?
Yeah, I don't normally go there. They've always got that wog box on.
Mark, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, that's not on, is it? What I said, it's...
No, so these guys are incredibly selfish, incredibly degenerate. But just like that serial killer who just wanted to make sure you knew, he's not a racist. So you can be, almost any degree of deviance, all right? You can go to gay orgies and do meth and infect people with monkeypox, but as long as you're not racist or homophobic or bigoted.
Not all right, is it?
Not all right.
No.
Right, you can be selfish, right? You can be degenerate. You can give people AIDS and monkeypox and other sexually transmitted diseases, but you cannot be racist.
And obviously you don't think there's a global Jewish conspiracy controlling everything.
What, you mean, am I a racist?
Yeah, if you think that and say those things, you're a racist, aren't you?
Well, yeah.
As it turns out.
So people aren't this one thing, right? You can say something racist doesn't make you a racist, right? You can engage even in homosexual sex. You don't have to take on the identity of a homosexual. You can have an adulterous affair, but adulterer may not be your primary identity. Right? This very human tendency to essentialize people by, oh, he's black, or he's an adulterer, or he sucked a cock, and so therefore he's as queer as a $3 bill. Right? People are complicated, man.
Daryl is a racist.
You sure he's a proper, it wasn't just racist horseplay?
Right, there's no such thing as racist, right? This is this made-up moral category that we've only had in the last 60 years, right? So for thousands of years, right, humanity got along without any such moral category as racist. Did the Talmud excoriate racism? Did Jesus excoriate racism? Was the Apostle Paul all concerned about racism? Were the great thinkers of the Islamic tradition particularly upset about racism? Were the major minds behind the Enlightenment, were they outraged by racism? Were the moral codes of other Middle Eastern peoples, aside from the Jews, were they particularly focused on racism? No, nobody ever talked about the evils of racism until the last 60 years. It's an entirely made-up moral category.
No, because I was in the tent with him for ages and we talked for a long time, and it was mostly on racial classifications, head measurements, and so on.
Wow.
So knowing things is bad, all right? Classifying things is bad, except for when it's good. So in many areas of science, making accurate measurements is considered a good thing. In many areas of life and in science and in business, classifying things accurately is a good thing. But when it comes to race, therefore we have to overturn all the other rules where knowledge is good, where classification is good, where exactitude is good, where measurements are good, where precision is good, where empirical research is good. Right, we have to ignore all that when it comes to race, and also when it comes to murderers. So there's been a little research that shows a lot of murderers have a disproportionate amount of facial disfigurements. But you can't really study the physical signs of that someone is more likely than average to be a criminal. All right, you're not allowed to study the biological origins of criminality. So when it comes to race, when it comes to the biological element in criminality, their measurements, classification, exactitude, precision, all right, being scientific, then that's a bad thing. So most things, precision is good, but when it comes to race or criminality or certain other sacred taboo topics, then it's a bad thing to know, right? You shouldn't have knowledge. You shouldn't know about these things. You shouldn't think about these things, to even entertain thoughts, to even notice things, to be a noticer, to recognize patterns. That's evil.
I feel terrible. Do you think I should confront him?
You mean you didn't confront him?
Yeah, no. Naturally, I confronted him, but maybe I should confront him again. More. Oh, listen,
Isn't that what people find so annoying about Christians and other religious people? Right? What if patriots and traditionalists and Christians went around confronting people who were sinners, who lacked a strong personal relationship with Jesus Christ, who weren't born again, who weren't flag-waving patriots, right? Why is it only people on the left need to go around confronting those who, lack their moral precision?
The truth is, I can't be associated with you anymore because you're a racist.
Huh? Yeah, but I thought we were on the same wavelength. You know, the sausage, the euro, Clarkson.
There's a difference, Daryl. You can't hate people because of their ethnic background.
Oh, right. Political correctness gone mad.
No, I hate political correctness gone mad more than anyone. I don't want to teach the world to sing. That would be horrible, but...
I want to teach the world to sing.
Slavery, the Holocaust, that's just not on. Whereas I Have a Dream, South Africa, Benetton, you've got to say, fair enough, yeah?
Yeah. Okay, no. Fair enough, you've taught me around.
I have?
Fuck off.
And of gods. Don't worry, we're not trying to kill him. It's just he's never had sushi before. He thought we were trying to poison him. It's all right, Gog. You're not.
So it turns out that that this Nazi he's the good guy in the whole story.
Oh shit! He knows. He knows it was me. He's got a pipe bomb in his trousers. Don't bomb me. You wouldn't bomb a whitey.
Listen, don't worry, I'm not going to embarrass you, all right? I'm going now. I just wanted to say, I don't care what happened, I still think you're a bloody good guy. Oh, and I took the rap for the sausage as well, so you're in the clear there. So, well, I'll see you around, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Peep Show Season 2, Episode 2, where the Nazi turns out to be the good friend. All right, let me get my act together here. This is Christopher Anderson.
This logic to my day-to-day life. Like, now that I know the truth, what am I going to do about it? How can I put this into action? And the reason that I'm so convinced, by the way, that Dugin is right, is because if you look at the picture of what's going on around us in the world today, so many things that seemed confusing or illogical all of a sudden make perfect sense when they're viewed in this context, and all the puzzle pieces fall into place. Such as, for example, the behavior of American liberals, well, hell, liberals anywhere, may seem contradictory at first glance, and one wonders if these people are just crazy. But when viewed in this context, it begins to make a lot of sense. So, for example, I'll just pull an example out of the hat. Immigration policy in the United States. American liberals want to flood the United States with as many immigrants from Central and South America as they possibly can. Do American liberals like people from Central and South America? No, they hate their guts. They don't respect them one bit. They refer to them as Latinx, which they themselves find very offensive, but it doesn't matter if you hurt anyone's feelings besides a liberal. Only their feelings matter. Do they respect the deep cultural traditions of people from Central and South America? No, they don't. They don't give a shit about that. Do they care about the family values of immigrants from, say, for example, Mexico? No, they don't. Do they care about the Catholic tradition of people from Mexico? No, they don't. They're condescending towards immigrants from Central and South America. They force them to be gardeners and maids, and they constantly patronize and talk down to them. So at first glance, it's very confusing. And it makes sense when you understand that all this is really about is destroying the collective identity of Americans, and at the same time, destroying the collective identity of Mexicans also. And basically what the globalists are trying to do is just turn humanity into one big undifferentiated mass, right? Like just generic human beings, homogenous global culture, as it's called, global homo. And suddenly, when viewed in this context, everything begins to make sense and the puzzle pieces fall into place. So, with this in mind and energized with this new information, I immediately asked myself, what can we do about it? And it seems to me that the obvious answer is, and by the way, I want to state at the outset, this workshop is in no way endorsed by Alexander Dugin himself. I don't know him. Hopefully he won't have a problem with it. If he does, well, whatever.
Okay, here's Kenneth Brown.
Yeah. We bring up the United States submarine fleet, blah, blah, blah. He does a separate thread where he addressed things, so I want to make sure that I cover this before I dig right into it. A lot of Americans virulently disagreed with my assessment of thought experiment of a war with China. One group said I was just stupid, but they didn't have the brains to tell me I was wrong. The other ones did give me rationale. Those were interesting responses. Some of the people said I was wrong because they pointed out the United States would use nukes immediately. This actually proves my point. The U.S. military is a paper tiger. They cannot fire, let alone defeat your competitor without immediately resorting to nuclear weapons. So basically, they say that's cheating. You can't do that. That's cheating. Another group insisted I was wrong because they said the U.S. would impose a total blockade on China. They don't seem to realize that was the point of having the Belt and Road Initiative for China to have another way to trade and get supplies in case of U.S. naval blockade. BRI is not complete, but it's close enough. The key issue is China's relationship to Russia. In a crunch, China could get Russia's fuel and food. After all, Russia is about to capture Ukraine. So there's a lot of assumptions being made here. The dumbest of the criticisms was China's economy would collapse. Only in America do people obsessively focus on the economy and their material well-being. China being an ethnically homogeneous country has higher values than just, that is such a low, that tweet alone is like, oh, chef's kiss, like so many assumptions. China, in China, apparently people don't obsessively focus on the economy and the material well-being. I'm going to need a fact check on that. And then China is an ethnically homogeneous country. Going to need a fact check on that. And has higher values than money. I'm going to need a fact check on it. I need fact checks on all of these.
Yeah, well, China is about 91, 92% Han Chinese. So I would say that's fairly homogeneous.
Things. I'm really, this tweet right here is like really, really far out there. Really a lot of assumptions. And we'll address it. Chinese people understand they're in an existential fight. They agreed with Russia's SMO, resulting in saying Russia-phobia sanctions. You don't think it had an effect on the Chinese people? They are not stupid. Chinese people do not have anywhere near the cynicism or resentment toward their leadership that the people of the West have for theirs. We in the West do not trust our leaders, but they do, or at least trust them far more than we do ours. Some to agree with here, but this is a dynamic situation. We've got to ask what would happen in case of a war. In an existential war, the Chinese people would support their leaders. So long as they get food, even if it's ration, they would support a war with America and accept severe disruptions to their lives. Americans who are soft and spoiled never would. Never would. Interesting. The key issue, collective solidarity. The United States has no sense of everyone being in the same boat. Diversity, immigration, plus the incessant identitarianism has led to a people who have zero collective solidarity. Americans cannot imagine a people who have it in spades. Thus, the people criticizing my threat insisted that the Chinese would never accept a broken economy as the price of an existential war. These are people, Americans, who very literally and explicitly value money over their lives. The Chinese are not like, that is a question. We have to question this. Do Americans value money over their lives? Okay, I have to doubt this. Because of the Chinese people's collective solidarity, they would accept whatever price necessary to win this existential war. They wouldn't care about a collapsing economy or even severe rationing. They know there are values more important than material well-being. What's interesting is we have an example within the last 70 years of what happens when the Chinese people are put under a wartime scenario. It was called the Chinese Civil War. And what happened is there was one side in that war which said we have to fight the external threat. We have to fight the imperialists. We have to fight the people who are invading our country. And then there was another group of the people.
Well, I think he's trying to talk about the 1979 China versus Vietnam War, where Vietnam kicked China's ass. So China hasn't fought since really 1979 when they lost. So China hasn't fought in a real war, a sustained war, since the Korean War 70 years ago.
Who said, who cares about those people invading our country? Who cares? Like, who cares about them? We need to solve our internal problems. And so the communists were the one who were actually fighting the Japanese. The Chinese nationalists, who are actually the Kuomintang, are actually in Taiwan today. They were the ones saying, we need to figure out this communism thing. Who cares about the Japanese? So obviously the Chinese communists won on the basis of we have to fight these invaders. But it is not so clear-cut. It is not so one-sided historically that the Chinese, in the event of an invasion from a foreign power, simply unites as a people behind one leader and fight with one vision and one will. Historically, China's been invaded many times by the Manchus, by the Japanese, by all kinds of different powers. And historically, they don't just solidify into one fighting group, one ethnic group. Now,
Yeah, I'm just reading a book on the history of England, and it was talking about how England was often a vassal for other powers, that the Vikings came in, raped and pillaged and set up shop. Then the Romans took over southern England under Julius Caesar. Then the Normans conquered under Norman the Conqueror in 1066. So for centuries, Britain was ruled by foreign powers, and then from the 16th century on through the 20th century, Britain was threatened by Spain, by France, and by Germany. So I know on the distant right, there's this big controversy between Richard Spencer, who believes in empire, and Greg Johnson, who believes in nationalism. But the situation is the boss. Sometimes an empire is the most productive way to go, and sometimes it isn't. Right? Sometimes situations encourage the building of empire, and sometimes they don't.
You could say the situation's different because China has been carrying out a deliberate plan of genocide against all its ethnic minorities for the last 70 years, and I would say, yeah, that does give us a different template. But historically, this is not something that we can just take as a 100%. Finally, there are critics who said I was completely wrong because the United States military would defeat China with submarines, aircraft carriers. Pointed to China's 1979 defeat by the Vietnamese as proof as China's military ineptitude. Dude, that was 43 years ago. Morons aside, Okay, he doesn't seem to address this paragraph at all. Morons aside, those insisting the United States military would defeat China are absolutely wrong, 100% wrong. How do I know they're so completely wrong? Because the United States military proved that they are wrong. In every war game that the United States military staged over the last 15 years, Team USA loses to Team China. In the last serious war game, the referees imposed limitations on Team China's tactics, gave Team USA wonder weapons that don't yet exist. Only then did Team USA win the war game, which proves my point.
Okay, Kenneth Brown isn't bringing anything to this. I mean, I just played 5 minutes of him, and not much insight there. Sorry, that was a waste. All right, Steve Saylor has an important column here, September 14, An End to Conquering. So the success of Ukraine's surprise northeastern offensive suggests a fundamental problem for the invaders. When it comes to seizing and holding land in Ukraine, the average Russian soldier's heart just isn't in it. Well, why should it be? After all, unlike Patrick Swayze's gorilla in Red Dawn, who says, hey, we're fighting because we live here, the poor Russian doesn't live there. That the modern male is less interested in conquest than his progenitors seems like a general pattern. Men will still fight bravely for their homelands or for what they see as a good cause, but less so to simply raise their flag over their neighbors' fields. I've been arguing for most of this century that the age of wars of conquest is drawing to a close. Why? In recent generations, the payoff from militarily subjugating foreign lands has been typically less than the cost. I had assumed that Vladimir Putin's cold-blooded rationality would cause him to stop short of starting a major war, so I felt pretty stupid on February 24, 2022, but now appears that not all the Russian troops got the memo that annexation is back in fashion. So a millennium ago, if you were William the Conqueror, the profit to you and to your Norman allies from conquering England was considerable. You took the Anglo-Saxon lord's land and you took his serfs. Today, all these centuries later, your descendants, Englishmen with Norman surnames, are higher class on average than those with English surnames. So the medieval view tended to be that somebody had to be the lord of the serfs, so why not me? This led to frequent wars, including England's 15th century War of the Roses, the basis for the Game of Thrones and House of Dragon TV series. Wow, House of Dragon is so bad. It is such a downer. It's such a bore compared to Game of Thrones. It doesn't have any of the good qualities of Game of Thrones. I found House of the Dragon just a dramatic letdown. I mean, I'm still watching every week. It's obviously high production value. I keep hoping it will get better. But House of the Dragon, biggest letdown in 2022 for any TV show that I've watched. So medieval European aristocracy comes from the Dark Ages roving bandits. But when feudalism succeeded, nomadic warlords turned into less destructive stationary bandits. They became settled aristocrats with a self-interest in leaving more prosperous estates to their heirs. Slowly, the more Europe prospered, the more it could afford to arm and defeat larger militaries. But what would motivate them to fight? So nationalist and democratic ideas have begun to replace the feudal spirit. Joan of Arc, during the 100 Years' War, was unimpressed by the English king's genealogical claim to the French throne. She insisted instead the English invaders should go home to their own island, leave France to the French. So it's increasingly come to be seen in poor taste for conservative militaries to steal a land from landowners. And industrialization means that fighting can go on longer. So seizing territory, other people's territory, just doesn't make economic sense anymore. So Hitler never seemed to realize that his Malthusian worldview had been rendered obsolete by the invention just before World War I of a process for manufacturing cheap nitrogen fertilizer. Germany didn't actually need vastly more land to support the growing population because agricultural productivity per acre was growing so fast. And that may explain the decline in our hunger for conquest. We're just not hungry enough anymore. Some great points there by Steve Saylor. Now, Andy Nowicki is making an earnest plea to the Anti-Defamation League on behalf of his friend Colin Liddell.
An earnest plea to the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. Dear ADL, I would like to make a most earnest, most sincere plea that you remove my former compatriot Colin Liddell from your list of infamy. It's really not fair that he still occupies a position on this list of infamy that you compiled back in 2017. This hit piece that you had one of your writers compose, from alt-right to alt-light, naming the hate. You should probably take that fellow off too. But I'm just going to focus particularly on Mr. Liddell. Okay, so scroll down. So they start off by talking about who's on the alt-right and who's on the alt-light. This was again back in 2017. Listed in alphabetical order by first name for some reason. So as you can see, I am the third one listed, in Nowicki, aka the nameless one, and I have not been such a good boy. So I fully deserve to still be on your list of infamy. So I'm not going to make any pleas on my own behalf. But I do wish, dear ADL, I do wish that you would remove Colin Liddell from this list. He really doesn't deserve to be there anymore. Over the last year, he has shown himself to be a worthy ally of the neoliberal dogma, which is favored by the ADL, of course, which it should be, of course. And I'm speaking on Colin's behalf here, just because I know he's too humble to speak on his own behalf. He wouldn't want to come forward and do this for himself. But so as a good friend.
Isn't that incredibly thoughtful of Andy Nowicki to do that? So what's going on with Vladimir Putin?
If you don't have a synergistic triangle between the armed forces, the population, and the government, then things start to collapse and you can't campaign.
Wow, I'm worried. I'm worried that Russia is not, all the different parts of Russia are not singing from the same prayer book. I mean, is the Russian military, aligned with Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, and with Russia's media, and with Russia's elite, and with Russia's people? I just fear that the Russian Empire is collapsing. They're not singing from the same prayer book. I mean, won't you pray for Russia, please, before it's too late?
To some of our leading tactical and strategic minds about the latest developments in the war in Ukraine. Today, let's welcome Major General Chip Chapman, former senior British military commander. Chip, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, John.
Hi, and also let's welcome Dr. Domitilla Sagramoso, the Professor of Russian Foreign and Security Policy at King's College London. Domitilla, hello.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's good to have you here. Chip, can I start with you? And just, if I can, just place you on the spectrum of a strategic opinion here. Because yesterday I was talking to one of your US former military colleagues, Ben Hodges, a former Lieutenant General in the US Army, and he felt that the Ukrainians had now attained...
And questions from the chat. Luke, do you have any regrets with regard to your incredibly lazy interview of Andy Nowicki? Yeah, it wasn't the best interview I've done. I could have done it better. Luke deliberately went after Andy with personal insults. Yeah, Luke deliberately quoted Andy back to Andy. I mean, could there be anything more insulting than to quote a man back to himself? My God, how did I do that? Do I miss Otto? Sure, I miss Otto. It's very hard to maintain comrades and fellow streamers when you're talking about hot button issues. So I could operate one of two ways. One is I could always make sure I was aligned with my audience and with the people that I brought on the stream, and not contradict them, not quote them back to themselves, not put them on the spot, pull my punches so that I could maintain social cohesion with my audience and with the people I bring on the stream. Or I could say what I believe to be true. And when I disagree with people, say that I disagree. And when I feel compelled to challenge someone over something, I can challenge them. But that comes with an enormous price. You lose a lot of social solidarity. You lose your audience because you're not giving your audience what it wants to hear. If I was just giving you reliable right-wing talking points, right, I'd have a much larger audience. All right, people turn to live streamers and pundits, generally speaking, to have their own prejudices reinforced. And if I wasn't challenging people that I'd bring on my show, then I'd have a lot more people on my show. If I treated them much more tenderly, didn't ask them awkward, upsetting questions, if I restrained myself from disagreeing with my audience or with the comrades on my show, then it'd be a lot easier to keep them around. So community, social cohesion, and freedom are intention. So I value my freedom. I value the ability to say what I believe. KMG said you were never his friend. We had a working relationship. We didn't have a personal relationship. So I don't form personal relationships with everyone that comes on the show, or even people that I work together for years. Some people that I work together with very quickly, we form a personal relationship, and I chose not to form a close personal relationship with Kevin. We had a pretty solid working relationship, and there are some people, I've had roommates where we just had a kind of a distant relationship, but cordial. And then other roommates where we had a close personal relationship. So you have to make choices. So I know Elliot Blatt says, man, you're always going after your own team. You're always going after the right wing, or you're challenging people who've been on your show, or you're criticizing or you're disagreeing with people who come on your show. So yeah, I make a choice, right? I so value my freedom to think and to speak, and those are related, right? When you restrict your freedom to speak, it restricts your thinking. Like, my thinking has been affected by my conforming of my speech to YouTube's terms of service. You are an odd duck. Even my mom said your voice was disturbing. Oh my God. With all due respect, you just didn't read Andy Nowicki's book. No, I didn't read his book. I read it afterward. Otto likes Andy more than you. I had a partnership with Kevin Michael Grace for almost 2 years, but it was a working relationship. I chose not to make it a personal relationship. Henry says, I respect Andy for his writing and his analysis of books, films, and music. I don't respect his political perspectives. Luke, are you worried about never getting married? No, I'm not worried about that. Luke is from the Musa movement. Well, I've probably been affected by the Musa movement. Colin's takedown of Andy was funny. Andy was disrespected by Luke. Otto hates Luke. Yeah, Otto does hate me, and I guess it stems from I made some mild criticisms of his attitude towards work, and that must have really stung. So, I mean, I just had the mild temerity to question things that he said publicly. So I wasn't taking, personal things that he'd shared in confidence with me. I wasn't taking any shots at his private life. I only made commentary on things that he said publicly, and if people object to me making a criticism of them, then I mean, he's welcome to build his anger. So he does display absolute loathing for me, and it's kind of weird because I can't think of anything I've done aside from make some moderate criticisms of his attitude towards work.
What he called an irreversible momentum in their favour in this war. First of all, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. From a military perspective, we like mission verbs, and the mission verb for defeat is to render an enemy incapable of achieving its objectives. So if you took both ends of that spectrum, on the maximalist side, that Russia wanted to take over all of Ukraine, you'd give that a cross. And if you looked at the minimalist side, what Putin said really on the sort of 23rd, 24th of February, that he was invited into the Donbass and it was to prevent genocide and it was a peacekeeping operation. I don't think he's going to be achieving his minimalist objectives if that were the case in Luhansk and Donetsk. So he is heading for a strategic defeat, but in the bookends of war, how a war finishes is more important than how it starts.
Yes.
The difficulty is getting to conflict termination and then ultimately conflict resolution.
And I really want to hear your thoughts on how that might happen and what it would look like. But Domitilla, do you then take the same view? We're looking at irreversible momentum in favour of Ukraine and already a strategic defeat for Russia. Do you believe that?
Well, I think it seems very likely at the moment. I mean, the advancement continues, and the Russians are in a position that they have very much exhausted themselves. They have problems with manpower. They have also problems with equipment. The morale is very low. There is a lack of coordination among the various forces that are participating in this operation. There isn't a clear sort of strategic objective that was defined by Putin. It was changed many times. First, it was to take most of Ukraine, then take a part of it. I mean, it's all these sort of moving targets make it very hard to mobilize fighters. Also, when when there is a sort of a perception of being on the losing side, there's a tendency to feel that there isn't really a reason why to continue fighting. So as we know, wars are always sort of a contest of wills. And I think in this case, this is very important. And having said that, I would just like to add that for Putin in particular, he's not going to give up easily. And I think he's going to try to muster more forces. He's going to try to build in some way additional forces that he can send. And he's probably waiting for the winter in Europe to see how European countries are going to react. So I wouldn't think that now this is going to be very, very quickly resolved in the short term.
Right.
So why did the Roman Empire fall? The Roman Empire fell because countries that were attached to it on the margins found that on the margin there was a greater price to be paid than a benefit to be gained from belonging to the Russian Empire. I think the same thing will happen to the Russian Empire, right? Various countries connected with Russia will realize that the price of being connected to Russia exceeds the benefits. And you can say the same thing about the American Empire. If becoming an American ally exceeds the benefits of becoming an ally, then more and more countries will switch away from...
Hey everybody, Peter Zine here, coming to you from Montreal, where I am by a chunk of the former Berlin Wall, which meant that I thought it was a wonderful time to talk about the collapse of empires, specifically for the Russian one. Now, as everyone has seen in early September, the Ukrainian counter-assault in places like Kherson and Kharkiv and Donetsk and Luhansk has been historic. It's going to be a few weeks before we really have an idea of just how successful the Ukrainians have been. But to give you an idea of scale here, the Ukrainians have captured more Russian equipment in the last week than the rest of the world has given Ukraine in terms of equipment in the last 6 months. And the captures have been so holistic that the Ukrainians have been able...
So how is the Ukraine war like the COVID crisis? I mean, it has resulted in the humbling of all sorts of very assured pronouncements. All right. During the COVID crisis, I wasn't particularly strong on one side or the other, just kind of steered a centrist path, recognizing that maybe the lockdown restrictions, there may be good reason for it.